All right. Good evening, folks. Sorry, we are having to do a couple of pre-recorded shows here. I'm sure, as you can imagine, some things have been pretty hectic. But during the course of the last few days, some things have come to my attention, just in sort of passing and, you know, as we move along here. But interestingly enough, when we talk about, what is due process of law and where do you find it? And we've been telling you to go to the book of legislative procedure. Well, I'm going to share this with you and let you hear it directly from the horse's mouth. So, without further ado on this.
Hey, everybody. So Chairman Adam Schiff says that non-committee members can't have access to all the hearings and depositions that have been happening with respect to the impeachment inquiry. Is that true? Just so happens I have a House rules and manual right here in front of me. So let's check the House rules. Right there. That's interesting. Read that. It says such records shall be the property of the House and each member, meaning we can actually go look at them. So let's go down to where they keep these records and see if they'll give us access so that we can inform you, the American people, what's really going on with this impeachment inquiry.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share right there because, as I'm sure many of you have already seen, this particular member of Congress was denied access to the congressional record. Needless to say, he's not a happy camper about that. So, just to show you, to kind of make the point that there's something to going to the rules of procedure. And even members of Congress are beginning to do it. Now, whether we had any influence over that or not, again, 6 of one and half a dozen of another at this point in time. So anyway, without further ado, I just wanted to, I'm going to go ahead and get into the actual PowerPoint that I've been preparing for you guys for the show tonight. And maybe if I can get it to start. So, welcome to the show, Kirk's Law Corner and E-Clause Loss Prevention, bringing you another edition of Monday Night Law. So, just to make sure everybody knows, I am a lawfully created corporation. I do work with Kirk. We do have our own private contract, and those are privileged contracts protected by Hale versus Hinkle, among many other case precedents, in case anybody gets any bright ideas. Any unauthorized usage of this information or material is strictly forbidden, and disparagement thereof will also be met with appropriate legal action. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics, let's get back to our research and redevelopment project. Still beta testing our new hashtag, Shift Made Up. So, hoping everybody is enjoying that one. And let's see here. Let's go into an examine law. What is law? Because this is a very common question I get. I mean, does it come from unicorns? I mean, where does it come from? So law is, of course, an acronym derived from the three testimony trusts. L meaning the law of the land or the Constitution, or as I say, jurisdiction one, defense of the nation. Okay. Air, ecclesiastical or religious ideological law, or as we're starting to realize, the political argument of the climate change shmew, which was global warming when I was a kid. So it's the same crap. It's just a whole different argument. And it's all pseudoscience. It's all garbage. It's all just a bunch of power hungry politicians or actors or people or whoever wanting powers that they don't have. And of course, W meaning water, commercial or contract law, admiralty jurisdiction, or as I call it, jurisdiction number 2. Okay, this is where we do business. So, and for those of you who have been following us, now we have laws with the new Space Force. So I have to be me and make sure that I always include that just because it's one of my favorite jokes. So one of the reasons that you're here is you have the same exact question that every one of us have had: how to overcome Rule 12b-6 motions to dismiss for failure to state a claim when I clearly stated the claim with department documentation in support in both my affidavit and the section of the brief titled Statement of Claim. You jackwagon. So this is what that argument looks like when you're standing there arguing with an idiot bar member. So let's go to due process of law. And due process of law, according to the law of the land, the Constitution, the first testamentary trust, is this bad rascal a petition of remonstrance. This is how you redress your grievances, whether it be within or without government. Okay, so basically this, which in essence is stating a lawful claim, defeating the typical 12b motions to dismiss filed by bar members when we go after them for malpractice. Yeah, you remember me. I'm the guy that paid you basically to throw me under the bus. So, I mean, I digress. So, in order to do this, you have to have what's called a cause of action. Cause of action grants you standing or power to proceed. In this case, as many of you know, this was the theft of the kids' money, and based on Schiff made up. And here's the documentation, which many of you have seen. So this is an example that many people say to me, well, I have so much evidence, where do I put it? This document goes in what's called the appendix of evidence of your petition of remonstrance. So this is what stating a lawful claim looks like. So I think to myself, oh, no, you're not. And of course, I meet Kirk along the way, and his favorite question to me was, are you going after the bar, bro? And I said, you betcha. Hold my beer. So what does that look like? Well, let's get into that a little bit, shall we? That would be these guys and their Schiff made up with their bar benefit card, that fourth pillar, that emolumentum going back to the 13th century. Tricky little buggers, aren't they? So, because if we look in the Black's Law Dictionary or many other law dictionaries, what you see is the 15th century reference. Advantage, profit, or gain received as a result of one's employment or one's holding of office. So, again, if you want to hide something, hiding means excluding it. Don't disclose it, right? Keep it secret. Star chambers and all that other stuff that we talk about here on the show. So, in the 13th century, going back to the etymology of the word in Latin, which is emolumentum, that is a profit, gain, advantage, or benefit. Well, that's the benefit card thing that I just mentioned right about here. So keep that kind of in the front of your mind as I kind of go through this and, go down and show you exactly how you've been scammed by the useful bar idiots, or confidence game, confidence trickery, snake oil salesman, confidence man. And I could go on for days about that stuff. So Moving on here. Here's the word in the dictionary, because just the same as you, I would go up to it and I would say, hey, there's a book on my shelf there. I got to look that up. So upon looking up the book, I see, or pull the book off the shelf and I look at it and I see the 15th century definition. Well, then I also see this constitutional law. Well, this is in reference to Congress. It's not reference to me. I'm not in Congress. But there is this second definition under constitutional law here that reads foreign emoluments clause. Oh, well, in a republic, we know the republic only has 3 pillars of law, 3 branches, right? Each branch has a job to do. Well, to know a thing and to be bound to know it are regarded in law as equivalent. Well, here's where that becomes relevant. I have on my wall this thing called an oath of office, and that word appears in my oath of office, which many of you already know. So I have to, of course, I go through and I read all of the what consists of those emoluments. In this particular case, there's something called a treaty, notary treaty here in the state of Florida. And this, it pretty much outlines this legal maxim for kind of the most part. So kind of giving you the idea of my job description. Well, there's nothing I enjoy more than a good argument. And I will go to great lengths to present a very good argument, because there's one thing that I don't horse around with when it comes to matters of seriousness, especially where my kids are concerned and their support and well-being, is the mechanisms that go into that. So I construct this, and we take this thing and we use it across the country. 3 different cases, which I'm going to get into in a minute. So we're going in now and we're going to make this political argument. Okay, this is, I have this fiduciary duty, this oath of office, errors and omissions insurance. So I obviously meet the minimum requirements, as I have already taken tests on and studied various emoluments throughout the course of my career. Of course, as we've said, the court took a look at that and said, well, you're probably, because you're not in our club, we'll go ahead and grant you standing, to go do whatever it is you're going to do. And you're going to Congress, you're going to make a political argument, you're not coming in here to bust my chops, so go to Congress and make your political argument, which is, of course, because of somebody else's shift made up. So I go in there and they're like, well, who the hell are you and what do you know about education? Well, stuff like this was on the test, because obviously I went to school too. So knowing how to watch for a shift made up was sort of, within the job description. Let's just put it that way. And this one I remembered from grade school civics class. This is that line from the Declaration of Independence. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, so on and so on. The reason the 2 words are highlighted in red is because those are the 2 words that I am focused on in the context of this project. Object being a proper noun because it is capitalized, and I want to know what the design is. Okay? Because I see what's happening. I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. And this was the job that I used to do, as articulated by a friend of mine. So bless her heart for that. I mean, this is basically how she perceives what I did for a living, or do for a living. So there's a little bit there, including the one on the bottom right. Don't have to bang your thumb with a hammer to know that's going to hurt. Well, within this job of loss prevention, we do these things in the private sector called a litmus test. This particular one is known as a quadratic. This is in context of business impact assessments. method commonly used in calculating certain factors or variables when measuring positives or negatives. So this is what it would look like if I were to put this thing on paper. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And because of the situation being political in nature, and you have to clearly state it, that's the reason I've gone into such great detail. Now, the reason for the color coding, the red and the blue, of course, is, things that we recognize, right, in the day-to-day business, subsidized business or relationships with government, whatever, or a positive nexus. Well, these are the things that you typically see if you were to walk into one of our big box stores and say, you need a quart of oil. So you're looking at the upper right-hand quadrant, right? The second and third quadrants are the one to the left. Oh, here, let me just, I'll go down through this a little bit more and start to explain into this. And, oh, yeah, here we go. The old shift made up guys, these invasion of the body snatchers. And, they with their, this is an unauthorized practice of law. Well, I got the consent of Congress. So, jackwagons, get out of here. Anyway, where was I before I was so rudely interrupted? Okay, here we are. So quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and quadrant 3, we are looking at the Republican model. Okay, 3 pillars of law. Well, the third quadrant, we're looking at the Democrat model, 4 pillars of law with their private club and their emolumentum benefits card, right? Well, now we know how they've achieved this standing in the courts that they use to deny justice, deny you due process, deny, treat you like you're a piece of garbage, yada, 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 call you everything from a white man to a sovereign citizen and pretty much everything in between. And then, of course, the fourth quadrant is the thing that we're going in there to discuss, these emoluments of statutable plunder, or that negative nexus. And, of course, we all know, algebraically speaking, -1 times -1 is +1. So now we see how quadrants 1 and 4 result in payments or a quote-unquote positive outcome. Because quadrants 2 and 3 are easy to prove the negative, right? One is negative, one is positive, but either way, the end result is negative. So concentrating on quadrants 1 and 4, we're going to move forward with that. I'm going to show you exactly how I go to work in quadrant 1. So I go through and I begin my process, what I know is loss prevention, and it looks kind of like this. So I'll be the guy claiming Richard Cranium, and I have this idea about this widget or framus called emoluments. Well, here's how I recognize those. Profit, advantage, and gain are the things inside government, the piece of paper, which, by the way, is what government is. And then, of course, the things on the outside of that are the areas that I worked in that jurisdiction too. So what's inside the triangle is jurisdiction 1. What's outside the triangle is jurisdiction 2. Remember those 3 testimony trusts. So kind of give you an idea of where those things have come into play and how I know those things and how I recognize them. So I go in and we assemble our meeting with my clients and I, and we have our quorum, discuss our preliminary impact assessments concerning the subject matter and the scope, and, call in the relevant members that are going to participate. So that's what that kind of looks like. And we prepare this brief in the case, and we say, shall we play a game? Well, we pick the 3 tic-tac-toe, checkers, and chess just for the sport of it. And we're not going to make this too complicated on anybody because we just want a simple question of what jurisdiction are we talking about? Because Congress says 1983. Well, because in the context of the case and the subject matter, the argument, and everything that was the law in this particular state, well, there's the word from the dictionary in the 15th century definition anyway. There's the law of the land from the state of Texas. There's what it says in reference to the word. And of course, we take this argument and we plug it into the computer. And this, of course, being the federal court. And just as we're getting into this, we run into these guys. Yeah, that would be the family court jackwagons. But anyway, I digress. So the court, the Whopper computer, the judge spits this out. And instead of 1983, he says, well, if you're going to Congress and you're talking about civil rights, here's the criteria. But it's not 42 USC 1983, it's 28 USC 1443. Here's the requirements. You guys have apparently met those, and in this particular case, because it was criminal in nature, we established reasonable doubt, which terminated the bad prosecution. So we've established that when you remove the cause, the effect ceases. Well, again, another maxim of law, which was within that particular brief. So now that we have jurisdiction, we go back to quadrant 1. We walk into Congress. This is what the presentation of the remonstrance would look like if I had to put it into a diagram. So I am here, and of course, along with my client, he is part of the quorum as a witness to testify in front of the committees on the subject matter under jurisdiction 28 USC 1443. And now all of a sudden, instead of the typical crap that we deal with bar members, now we're getting this type of a greeting. So again, I don't know about you, but whenever these people start to change their tune, of course, I am suspicious. And by now, of course, we have figured out that because he and I both have the same problem, we paid the bill, but they keep insisting that they're going to throw you in jail anyway. Well, because of the difference between these subsidies versus stipends. Well, there's what we would consider a positive in the private sector. Well, the negative is the stipend. That's the theft, right? That they're stealing from the Social Security Fund to run these monopoly privatized corporations, blah, 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 blah. You don't get to see them. You don't have any standing against them, whatever. You're told you're a piece of crap and all that other shift made up. And it's all constructed by these guys. Remember this guy here, this guy with this benefits card from the 13th century, because they've selectively hidden that emolumentum. And they're the ones making all this garbage. All right. So there's your shift made up, and there's who did it. All right. So now that we've established that jurisdiction is mandated, okay, we have begun this impeachment mechanism. Okay. Well, it started in the judiciary. Well, because that is the improper committee, right? Because we are talking about foreign emoluments, right? Foreign ideologies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the only committee that was convened was the Foreign Affairs Committee. So there's your Schiff made up. That's how it went from judiciary to Adam Schiff. So this is where it gets fun about, remember, inside the argument, we were talking about those extra pillars of law and the star chambers and, you know, all of that crap that every one of us have dealt with. So as I specifically said, which is one of the reasons why I played the video at the beginning of this recording, was because this is exactly what I did. I said, walk in and open your book. Turn to put your thinking caps on, turn to page 25, section 16, read out loud for the rest of Congress to hear. Okay, so now that we've covered this, and you can now see that even Congress is going back to the book, right? Because everybody is sick and tired of this Schiff made up. right, in one form or fashion or another. And yes, this means you bar members with your emolumentum benefits cards. You and your monarchy crap. Just I could watch them smack his face into the ground all day long and never get tired of it. So, yes, emolumentum from law school, you genius, right? So, place you were supposed to learn about the law, that, but went a long train of abuses and usurpations. Yeah, you remember the law. Okay, well, we find out they don't even teach the law. Huh. Well, anyway, could go on about that for days, but that would bore you to tears. So I go in and I say, well, my name gives an intent, or gives my intent gives a name to my act, hence loss prevention. The person of a human being can have no price put on it. That's the human trafficking, the peonage, debt slave, right? The law does not command useless things because useless labor is foolish. A person is considered a possessor who has ceased possession through fraud or injury. Ooh, we're getting into that ninth principle of group decision making now. And of course, the crime of treason exceeds all other crimes in punishment. So I don't care what happened. If treason is present, we're going to deal with that first. So, here we go again. Oh, Mr. Jackwagon. Yeah, as you can tell, we deal with these ones a lot. So, what does the letter of the law say? Well, there's the emoluments clause, or what they're going to try to call the foreign emoluments clause, based on my experience now. And for those of you just joining us, the original 13th Amendment. And that's exactly what that was supposed to do. Keep out those foreign ideologies, those foreign pillars of law, etc., 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 etc. So it is happening. And here's me as a friend of the court. And as of July 29th, here is one of my clients who went in and took his actual remonstrance and handed it off to Michael Conaway. And now you know why we are in this process that we're in. The Foreign Affairs Committee, because these are foreign emoluments based on foreign ideologies, we just got done saying. And of course, because I was already there with under these series of reports with this particular client, and of course, this mom and her son, and this mom and her kids. And now we've established a legislative intent. Well, because you have to have a legislative intent when you go to the legislature. So there's the legislative intent according to the 13th Amendment. So this, of course, all this stuff is posted for you guys to enjoy. Have fun with it, because Lord knows I had fun writing it. So I hope you enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. So let's get it back into these, stick this right up your anus type of a thing, right? Because that's exactly where all this crap is headed. And yes, this means you bar members with your emolumentum benefits cards. Let's get into quadrant 4. These are those foreign emoluments, that foreign business plan, right? That, or what we now know, and I'm just going to say it, call it what it is, Sharia law, right? So these jackwagons are trying to enforce this on the people, and here's how they get away with it. Because the Bar Association, when in the 1800s, came in and forced itself without the consent of Congress to do the thing that it's doing today, hence the 13th Amendment, you have to have the consent of Congress. Well, they never had the consent of Congress. So they inserted themselves with the authority to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever, which is the thing that we know started the War of 1812. And no, it wasn't about slavery. It was about us throwing the bar the hell out of here and the monarchy right along with it. So, because these actors knew that, they exploited it, right? This is what this ideology does. They look for the weaknesses and exploit the weaknesses. Well, as far as, for example, with mothers dealing with this stuff, one of those weaknesses is that they exploit. Women don't have the ability to turn off their emotions. Men have that switch in our head. So, again, of course, I see them doing this and I say, oh, hell no, you're not. So we're going to take that and throw that the hell out of here because that is foreign to our form of government. Going back to the first quadrant. This is the stuff you all recognize because this is the stuff that we all do at work every day. So we now have the standing mandate, hence I am here. I'm the guy with the bright idea. And jurisdiction is laid out. And the key thing about this is, now, if you remember, you go into that group principles of group decision making, has to be jurisdiction has to be established within the process. They can't just assume it. It's got to be granted. So what have they been legislating without establishing jurisdiction first? So in other words, the powers that they've used to do all of the crap they've done were not just powers. They didn't have consent. Why? Because, like, for example, as Kirk has said, there's never been a petition of remonstrance in the state of Idaho. So how was there ever any law passed beyond its constitution? Which, ironically, is a very good question, to say nothing of these agencies and yada, yada, yada. So let's get into some of the words that are being thrown around. Why? Because that's what bar members do with their word salad. And this one is always fun because it sounds so sinister. Quid pro quo. An action or a thing that is exchanged for another action or thing, or more or less, or of more or less value. A substitute, for example, the discount was given as a quid pro quo for the extra business. We just say, what are we doing here? We're doing business. Okay. Well, if there's going to be a quid pro quo, the benefit under contract, that's called a reciprocity. And it has to be a mutual or bilateral. In other words, it has to be agreed upon. Okay. Or there has to be a mutual concession of advantages or privileges. Oh, okay. Well, so somebody has to give and somebody has to relinquish. This is, of course, what I commonly say. When a deal is made, compromise is a resolution that neither side is happy with, right? Well, there's where that comes from, this word, reciprocity. And, of course, intellectual property, which I won't go into all that stuff right now. So, again, knowing what a subsidy is, okay, here's where the word subsidy comes in. And this is all the stuff that we do in business. This is a grant usually made by government to any enterprise whose promotion is considered to be in the public interest. Although governments sometimes make direct payments, such as cash or grants, subsidies are usually indirect. They may be in the form of research and development support, tax breaks, provision of law materials at below market prices, or low interest loans or low interest export credits guaranteed by government agencies. So, kind of give you an idea of how we do business internationally, right? Globally. And there's that word again. So when we walk in and we throw this word in there, because we know they're trying to hide it, right? Trying to exclude it, because they want to keep those stipends all to themselves. They don't want those things coming out, right? They want to be able to, hey, those are emoluments. Those are emoluments. No, those are emolumentums, stipends, not subsidies, not Republican in character and form, monarchy in character and form. So We go in and they say, oh, yeah, well, who are you? Oh, that's right. I'm the guy who walked in here to inquire about this word in my oath of office. Yeah, you remember me. The guy who asked also who stepped on the Lego. Yeah, now you want to use me to impeach the president. Oh, you're a moron. Anyway, I move on here. Let's see. I'm the guy with the proper standing, the subject matter jurisdiction to deal with old Schiff made up. And of course, here's the knowing how to use that tool in the toolbox. Remember, we just got done showing the video. So that's the reason that, you know, whether we've had any influence on these guys or not at this point, I don't even know. But to see them going to the book and making direct reference to the book publicly, that's what needs to happen. So again, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, we are already on the path to resolution. And this is the stuff that is not Schiff made up, right? Because we verified that. We looked in the book, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, this means you, bar members, with your emolumentum cards, with your monarchy character and form. Yes, this was the letter I sent to Dianne Feinstein, right? All of these things that she was able to verify. See this? This is standard lettered blocker. I'm sorry. This is standard MLA type format, right? Kind of blocked to the left there. Person to whom it's addressed. You have your opening, the body of your letter, and of course your closing. So, power to make investigations. Well, I'll be damned. There it is in black and white. And I haven't lost anyone yet, I hope. That's for sure. So what does that look like? Go to page 561. And we're starting to see that there's a lot of these things starting to happen, right? Because we've ordered a lot of these. I've sent these things off like Skittles. You know, taste the rainbow, bar members, because we're coming at you, right? This is the process on how to do that. This is where it comes from. So when you go into your state legislature and you say open your book to page 561, those of you who use states that use Masons, or whatever state you're in, you know, pick your manual, pick your poison, as I always say, and go to page 563 here. When they try to argue with you and say, I don't have the power to do that. Oh, yes, you most certainly do. Read number 10, right? We've shown this many times on the show. So not only is it not a trespass for them to do their job and order the investigation, they are the instruments of the government. They are the instruments of us, right? That's where we, the people, all the political power is. So when one of the reasons why many of you have asked me, why don't you run for office? Because I can do a lot more damage in this war room sitting right where I'm at. So these guys, by the way, politicians on the left side of the aisle still think they can win this thing, right? Yeah. Well, we've seen this movie before. We know how this turns out. So we know here's the duties of the presiding officer, page 406 and 407. Went over those once or twice. And let's see here, 408, right? 409, refusal of the presiding officer to do that job. Well, there's consequences for that. Okay, well, there they are. Well, in the reverse of that, if there is an emergency of presiding power, for example, Congress is out of session, you call them back into session, right? That is the calls for legislative session, call for peaceable assembly. Now, that's where it comes from, and here's the process. So that may require an emergency power, state of emergency. We got a hurricane coming, for example, those of us that live in Florida. So going back to page 25, there it is right there. We already know that there's at the very least bad faith. Fraud we've proven, and we think we pretty much nailed both of these right down. So we employ another maxim of law. Well, we know if fraud and cunning have occurred, an action for fraud is admissible. Here's where it gets sticky. What's the action, right? Who's going to be criminally prosecuted? Who's going to be civilly prosecuted? Yep. And here we go again. There's this guy, right? This sovereign citizen. Oh, you jackwagons, you guys are killing me. So back to the letter of the law. Because remember, talking about subject matter, at least for me, was these transactions, right? Transactions, occurrences, or events. So mine was a transaction. So let's get into parts of the Constitution that we talk about transactions. We're talking about money, right? There's the word money in law, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. All right. So this is applicable in some form or fashion. Is Congress doing this? Well, we've already discovered that no, they're not doing this. We've already discovered the effect that it has on the courts. We've discussed it. Hence the reason we keep getting called everything from a sovereign citizen to an enemy of the state. You hate your government and da-da-da-da. Say that again. This is what the political argument of fighting over money looks like. Subsidies versus stipends, right? Remember, this is the subject matter that we're talking about here. And the political trick-tac-toe of this crap, right? This business plan, these foreign emoluments of statutable plunder, within these kangaroo courts, star chambers. This is all in the agenda. So again, I didn't write this crap. It came long before me. So let's look at a stipend. Let's look at its 15th century definition, because this is what we've decided we're going to stipulate to, the 15th century definitions, even though that we know the 13th century definition of emolument is definitely relevant. So this is a salary or other periodic payment. Sounds a lot like a subsidy, doesn't it? It's also a tribute to support the clergy, usually consisting of payments in money or grain. Now, why is that relevant? That is relevant because a lot of these actors are under what? A nonprofit. And nonprofits are usually created under some form of religious ideology. So there's our comparison and contrast between stipends and subsidies, right? Subsidy, a grant usually made by the government to any enterprise whose promotion is considered to be in the public interest. Oh, like I say, those things sound a lot alike, don't they? So let's see here. What have we gotten here? We've gotten a bunch of pretended acts of legislation, creating a society of useful idiots consisting of politically advantageous privileges and immunities whose primary function is to screw the next guy to get ahead while measuring the level of who are you willing to throw under the bus for their amusement, them being the bar members. Now you know why I avoided this profession like the plague. Because it's all fake. It's fake status, fake standing, fake jurisdiction. It's consequently the birth of the two reasons why I never make apologies anymore. The right people don't want them, and the wrong people will only exploit them. So if you don't want the truth, don't ask. As far as this whole thing with this socialism goes, we've already been down this road in history. We saw what happened, right, with the whole Russia, and all the corruption going on and everywhere from Venezuela to Ukraine, and hell, even over in Parliament now, even over in the monarchy, which is sense of irony as far as I'm concerned, poetic justice. So you can take that socialism and watch that just disappear, because there's always going to be somebody like myself who's going to make it their mission in life. Hence my reference of substitution of my middle name. And this is the research and development project known as the emoluments of the 15th century versus the 13th century emolumentum. So, what do we know about this whole thing? You know, it's a strange move. Or strange game. The only winning move is not to play. So this is why I am now laughing at them, and I'm no longer laughing with them. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. This video has been brought to you by Kirk's Law Corner and eClaws LLC. And of course, my brand new shiny 2019 hashtag Shift Made Up, along with special appearances by these guys. And of course, this guy, because he is a pain in the ass, but he's funny to watch with that look on his face, with just how their heads explode as the reality of life comes crashing down around them, that they're not entitled to things that they didn't earn. So expect to see a lot of this over the next year or so. And yep, that's the last slide. So again, as I say, my apologies for being so late on that. But as you know, things are crazy busy. I'm sure you heard the phone ring once or twice, text messages and various other prompts. So on that note, I'm going to end this recording and try to get this video posted for you guys. So we hope to see you back here on Wednesday night live.